A woman who wants or needs an abortion does not travel to Texas these days. Now, that statement may sound rather banal, but in the U.S., geography can once again determine a woman's right to choose. And what is true about Texas could be true about other U.S. states as well. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court began hearing challenges to the new abortion law in Texas, known as the Heartbeat Act. Now, the law prohibits abortions in all situations beyond the 6th week of pregnancy. Doctors can be sued by anyone if they suspect an abortion was carried out and that a fetal heartbeat had been detected. Whether this is even enforceable remains an open question. The Supreme Court is expected to answer the question, can Texas be sued for these new restrictions on abortions, and sued by whom?
In May this year, the Republican governor of Texas signed into law the so-called Heartbeat Bill. It bans abortions after a heartbeat can be detected in the womb, normally around 6 weeks.
Our Creator endowed us with the right to life, and yet millions of children lose their right to life every year because of abortion. In Texas, we work to save those lives.
The state does not belong in our bodies.
For abortion rights activists, the law amounts to a virtual ban on abortions. At 6 weeks, many women don't know that they're pregnant yet. The law makes no exceptions for rape or incest. Abortion providers and the Justice Department argue that the law is at odds with the 1973 Supreme Court ruling known as Roe v. Wade. Since that landmark case, abortions have been legal until the fetus can survive outside the womb at around 24 weeks.
Roe v. Wade?
The Biden administration says the Texas law is unconstitutional.
The right of women to make decisions about their own bodies is their decision. It is their body. And no legislative institution has the right to circumvent the Constitution of the United States.
What makes the Texas law different from other states' efforts to restrict abortions is how it's policed. The state will not enforce the law. Instead, private citizens can sue abortion doctors or anyone who helps facilitate an abortion. This has made the law unusually difficult to challenge legally. The Supreme Court has a conservative lean since former President Donald Trump appointed 3 justices to the court. Now, these justices will decide whether the federal government and abortion providers can sue Texas. The decision is likely to set the path for abortion rights in the United States for years to come.
And for more on this now, we want to go to our Washington Bureau Chief, Ines Pohl. Good evening to you, Ines. The challenge here that's been brought in by Texas abortion providers and the Biden administration, how exactly do they want to block this law?
Well, Brent, it's important to understand that this ruling is not about the legality of abortions per se, as we just heard in our little piece. What the Supreme Court is discussing is how the law is being enforced. That means the way the law is written. Private citizens like neighbors or even Uber or cab drivers get paid if they report that a woman got an abortion after 6 weeks into her pregnancy. And that outsourcing, so to speak, is in the center of the Supreme Court ruling.
The judges, they have been listening to arguments today. Is there any indication of how the hearings went or which direction maybe the justices are leaning?
Well, given the questions the Supreme Court justices asked during the hearing today, it appears that the conservative-leaning court may not rule in favor of this Texas law, and that would represent an important shift from a 5-4 ruling in September that allowed this law to go into effect. So, Brent, this court ruling is watched very, very closely here in the United States, because if the court rules that the law is constitutional, this could be a blueprint for conservative-leaning states to implement very strict abortion laws.
And do we know, Ines, what consequences will the Supreme Court's decision have for the future of abortion rights in the U.S.?
Well, it's interesting that normally it takes like weeks, sometimes months before we have a ruling from the Supreme Court. But in this specific case, we might have a result as early as the end of the week. Why? Because the court will hear another case about abortion rights from Mississippi on December 1st. And that directly questions the legality of abortion. So that even means if the Texas law is deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, this time this highly politicized discussion about women's rights will not be over. And that might be hard to understand for our international audience, that this discussion is taking place in the United States in the year 2021.
That's right, with echoes of the 1970s. Hard to believe. Ines Pohl with the latest tonight in Washington. Ines, thank you. And for more now, we want to turn to Barry McDonald. He's a professor at the Caruso School of Law at Pepperdine University. He joins me tonight from Westlake Village, and I would argue that the professor has the best view from his window of anyone on the show tonight. Professor, it's good to have you on the program. We have no Malibu here in Berlin, in case you didn't know. Let me start with the Supreme Court. They've been asked to decide whether or not the Texas law can be legally challenged and by whom. So it could rule that the Biden Justice Department cannot sue, but that a physician's practice can. Am I reading that right?
Well, you know, there were two arguments today. One by the federal government that, you know, the Supreme Court should enjoin the Texas law at the request of the federal government. And then there was a separate lawsuit and argument that the plaintiffs should be able, you know, abortion doctors, et cetera, should be able to get an injunction from the law going into effect, instead of waiting to be sued and then raising sort of the conflict with the law and Roe versus Wade as a defense once you've already been sued.
The Texas law basically deputizes citizens who suspect an abortion doctor has carried out the procedure, although a fetal heartbeat was detectable. I mean, as a legal expert, talk to me, can this even be enforced?
Well, it certainly can. So Texas designed this statute purposefully so that it would be very difficult to challenge this law in federal court before a abortion provider got sued for the $10,000 in damages that the law provides for. And Texas did this intentionally because they thought, well, if you know, it can't be challenged until somebody's sued, then that's going to sort of just chill abortion providers from providing abortions and will sort of work indirectly to ban abortions. And in actuality, that's the operation that it's had in the state of Texas.
What do you make of what we're hearing, that the two newest members of the Supreme Court, both Trump appointees, are leaning towards being in favor of challenging this law because of its unique infrastructure? What do you understand under unique infrastructure?
So, I mean, you know, the argument is that if the Supreme Court were to allow a state to essentially deputize private citizens, as you said, to block the exercise of protected constitutional rights, that even though this case involves abortion rights, which are favored by the more liberal members of society, you know, the argument is that, well, then liberal states like California could pass laws enabling its citizens to sue people from exercising their Second Amendment gun rights, which are favored by conservative members of society. And so I think it's the idea that, you know, states could just get into the business of allowing people to circumvent Supreme Court rulings. That's going to lead, I think, a majority of the court to find a way to say that Texas cannot do this.
So you're not worried about this in some way extending states' rights in an unforeseen way?
No, you know, I'm all for a healthy balance of power between the federal and state governments. It's become skewed way in favor of the federal government in terms of what the founders of our country envisioned. Mm-hmm. So I don't mind, you know, sort of righting that balance. But the way that Texas is going about it is this, you know, to deputize private citizens to allow to prevent the state from getting stopped from interfering with constitutional rights. So they're doing this, purposefully to allow, get around Supreme Court precedents that essentially protect certain constitutional rights. And I just don't think that states should be allowed to do that.
Professor Barry McDonald joining us tonight from Pepperdine University. Professor, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.